Again, my name is George Zeitler. I am one of two co-owners for Reliable Maritime Solutions. We're based in South Florida. Little background about us is that we are combined. The principals are over 25 years experience as U.S. Coast Guard Marine inspectors and over 10 years combined as class surveyors with D&V over the years. We've also got over 7 years of combined operating experience for a cruise line. So we've brought in to bring in both operational as well as regulatory experience to our clients. Pre-COVID, 95% plus of our business was with the cruise lines, doing everything from pre-purchase surveys, condition evaluation surveys, damage surveys. We also provided technical consulting by way of project management, risk assessments, compliance assessments, environmental and third-party auditing, as well as acting as superintendent or owner's reps during dry dock intervals. As through this, or in this technical consulting role, we were brought in because of our Coast Guard experience to assist in assist a shipyard in developing or delivering a new build that passed Coast Guard inspection and could operate in the U.S. And so we'll be talking a little bit about some of the experiences we've had with that project. The project itself is a 190 meter long, 24 meter, just under 25,000 gross ton ultra luxury cruise ship, capacity of 298 passengers, 246 crew, with a keel laying back in January of 2018. The design for the vessel was provided by a third party that is not involved in the construction, and subsequent naval architect work is being handled by the shipyard itself. The shipyard, we'll start with the owner. It's a startup company, first time into the cruise industry, and they're jumping right into the high-end luxury market. The owner is using a third-party ship manager who does have experience operating small to medium-sized cruise ships, and the technical department within the owner's operation does have cruise line experience, but they are drawn from a number of different brands over the years, and so it's a matter of bringing differing philosophies together. The shipyard itself has a very lengthy history dating back to the late 1800s. However, their typical building projects are ferries, chemical tankers, blue water tuna fishing, trawlers, and then some other workboats and other ancillary vessels. Have absolutely no experience with cruise ships, either the expedition or luxury type, and they are still using what I now consider outdated construction processes. Individual plate layup, welding, hand welding, and so forth. There's little to no automation and no assembly line processes like you would see at some of the major cruise shipyards. Regulatory oversight is being done by the class society, the flag administration, and because the vessel intends to operate part-time in the U.S. Coast Guard has a regulatory role to play as well. One thing I will back up and jump in with the third part, the ship manager. Their interaction with the project does not begin until the vessel is almost due for delivery. So they have no presence in the yard or with the site team for the owner. Vessel is going to be 11 decks long, or 11 decks high, 8 of which are passenger use, 3 for crew and service. They're using diesel electric propulsion with azipod thrusters, 4 lifeboats, 2 passenger tenders, which are stored internal to the vessel, 8 Zodiac excursion boats that are being stored on one of the upper decks with a telescoping crane for launching. And then and this is providing some of the problems that the yard is facing is because of the ultra luxury nature, they've gone for a comfort class notation that has a high demand on noise and vibration, resulting in most of the bulkheads having to have vibration dampeners installed, which makes modular construction difficult. Our role was to manage the Coast Guard inspection process for the shipyard. Again, they have absolutely no experience, and while the ship owner's site team does have some experience, again, they're trying to pull their processes together, so they're not really focused on that. They're more focused on delivery and making sure that they're getting what they need. From the Coast Guard's perspective, their focus areas are fire protection, LSA stability. When I say watertight door analysis, this is an assessment or a verification that Flag has evaluated any requests for watertight doors that remain open during navigation in accordance with SOLAS and IMO guidelines. They look at ventilation primarily for A-class boundaries, fire dampers, and so on, nav systems, machinery, pollution prevention being the focus areas. We're also providing some quality control to the shipyard. In that manner, we're doing focus areas, focusing on the areas of Coast Guard inspections to verify that their compliance with SOLAS requirements prior to having the inspection teams visit the vessel. We also coordinate and lead the project during the inspections, and we're an additional set of eyes for quality control on general construction techniques. For those that are not familiar, within the U.S., foreign flag vessels looking to embark passengers have to be inspected and issued a certificate of compliance by the U.S. Coast Guard. In many ways, it is somewhat similar to an expanded port state control exam, but in this case, it's being carried out under U.S. law that actually dates back to the 1966-67 SOLAS amendments for the 1960 convention. It's fairly intensive inspections, includes plan review, which is somewhat unique, and then they send regulatory inspection teams to the shipyard, as well as when the vessel arrives in their first port, they carry out crew drills and check on ISM issues. There's also a requirement for Public Health Service to be involved and verify construction of the public safety areas, galleys, restaurants, dining areas, food service, food prep, pools, and areas like that. They do their own plan review, and they typically send their own inspection team to the shipyard, and they will attend the vessel upon its first port. The U.S. Coast Guard's process starts with a concept review, which is to hash out any interpretive issues, new design or arrangements not seen on other vessels, or alternative design arrangements in accordance with SOLAS. In this particular project, a concept review was carried out, but it was not carried out by the technical team from the shipyard or the project manager. It was more of a marketing group that went and carried it out. So this put some of the design issues behind the 8 ball during this project. Subsequent to that, as the vessel construction gets underway, a plan review is carried out. They're looking for 3 sets of final drawings and documentation that are approved by FLAG or the recognized organization. They're going to carry out their own review for compliance with SOLAS or MARPOL as necessary. And one of the issues we run into is their interpretations, which can differ from some other FLAG administrations. Once the vessel is under construction, they will send their first exam is a structural fire protection exam, where they're looking at insulation, means of escape, and similar type ventilation for the fire dampers, fire screen doors, watertight door installations, and those types of things. The goal here is to examine those structural aspects that will be relatively inaccessible in the final form of the vessel due to the various bulkhead liners, ceilings, etc. It's designed to minimize the potential for damage occurring by opening up these areas. Not shown here is the potential for an intermediate visit if the vessel is using novel life-saving arrangements or marine evacuation systems. They will typically come and witness the deployment of 50% of those systems as required by class or being carried out for class anyways. About a week before the final exam, which is typically done within about 3 or 4 weeks before delivery, they'll come and do a quick assessment just to make sure that enough progress has been made. There are no outstanding issues that are going to prevent a successful exam, and then they carry out the exam typically in the shipyard. It's almost similar to a commissioning exam for a lot of these safety systems, with regards to the extent that they are going through and testing alarms and trips and quick closing valves, smoke detection, and everything else. They will take the fire control plan, do a complete walk of the vessel to validate the fire control plans, and so forth. One of the most intensive parts of this exam is the emergency power and transitional power testing that they do, which requires a complete blackout of the ship. They'll do the 30-minute load testing of the transitional power batteries and validate voltage drop there. And then they will do a complete walk of the vessel to look at emergency and transitional lighting to ensure sufficient for escape. Typically, this is a 2 to 3 hour test and requires everything to be shut down on the vessel so that watertight doors can be tested, fire doors, and everything else. Assuming that everything goes well and there's no significant issues there, once the vessel arrives in its first U.S. port call, a local team will attend to clear any work list items, witness crew drills, review certificates of competency, and the certificates for the vessel. So you can see it's a very extensive process, and obviously those that have dealt with the Coast Guard in the past, having experience and understanding their language and their what areas of concern typically drive them is very beneficial. So one of the first questions that we had with this project is why this shipyard? And traditionally there are 4 major shipyards for the cruise industry for the large ships. Fincantieri in their yards in Monfalcone and Marghera, and those are booked out through at least 2027 at the moment by the major brands. Meyerwerft in Papenburg, Germany, and again, they're booked out through about 2027 based on the brands listed here. Meyer Turku, which used to be STX, and they've got Carnival, Royal Caribbean, and TUI being built there. That's where Carnival is building their LNG powered ships. And then STX France or Chantier, depending on which day of the week you're talking. And they're building Celebrity and MSC, and they've got a final Oasis class ship, I believe, for Royal Caribbean still. Just for comparison purposes, 2021, despite the pandemic, there are currently 27 cruise ships scheduled for delivery. And I believe it's something in the neighborhood of 39,000 berths. So with the major yards being tied up, and this was done purposely by the major players to make sure they had access to the yards. A lot of the smaller brands, the expedition vessels, the river cruise vessels, as well as some of the ultra luxury vessels, are going to other areas of the world. Lloyd Werft in Germany, and that was actually that shipyard was actually purchased by Genting so that they would have access to new building. You've got builds in Poland, Norway, some of the smaller, or I would say the high-end luxury yacht builders in Mariotti in Italy, Vard, and then now you're starting to see some shipbuilders out in China, which is a joint project with Fincantieri for Carnival, Croatia, and so forth. And none of these projects that you see listed here are one-off ships. These are typically a series, a 1+1, 2+1 type of purchase arrangement on the new builds. So that means that when you have new players trying to get into the market and building new vessels, they are somewhat frozen out and having to look elsewhere, and that again leads to some of the headaches that we've run into. Challenges we've had in this project: the shipyard has no experience dealing with a regulatory agency similar to the Coast Guard. As I said, the Coast Guard has their own philosophies and interpretations, and that increases the level of dialogue. And for a shipyard that is used to building ferries and tuna fishing vessels, they're typically dealing with class, who handles all the flag issues, and they're dealing with the owner. And so having this additional level of oversight is not something they understand or they really are able to deal with. The new owner, as I said earlier, the technical department has a lot of experienced professionals who have experience building, doing new builds and delivering ships, but their organizational philosophy and work processes are underdeveloped. Lack of designer participation. As we have gotten into some questions have arisen on the design and the layout of the vessel, we're left with the minutes of meeting notes taken by the shipyard during the design phase in order to try and determine the design philosophy behind things like steps in some of the main vertical zone bulkheads and things like that. Third-party ship manager, as I said, not actively involved. So things like the emergency instructions, muster station bill for the crew have yet to be developed, and so you start looking. That's a big factor for the Coast Guard, and how well thought out the processes are, and the instructions available to the crew can cause problems and lead to the crew not successfully presenting the vessel upon delivery.
George, it's Mike just popping in here. I've got a question that's popped up on chat.
Sure.
What county, I think that's probably country, not company, is this yard in, please?
It's a European shipyard. I'd rather at this point not say which specific country, other than it's a Western European country.
Okay, thanks, George.
Under vessel construction, the major yards have perfected modular construction techniques. For example, Meyer Werft has gone so far to bring in Porsche to consult on their automated fabrication processes and procedures. They maximize the use of automated welding techniques. They streamline the construction process by adding or installing duct penetrations and brackets, support brackets and things like that early in the process, which help to minimize rework. And this has been a major headache for us during this project. This particular shipyard, again, is using old school techniques. It's a linear type construction within a space. In other words, the bulkheads are being built, then they install all the insulation, whether it's thermal, acoustic, or structural, or in some cases, all three. And again, that goes back to the headache that gets caused by the comfort notation from class. Then they start in with installing cable runs, pipe runs, HVAC, etc. And as a result, they then go back and they start having to tear out sections of insulation and causing a lot of rework. It's very manpower intensive, and it has a lot of rework that's going on. It also places great emphasis on the final inspection before closing up the space. You're really asking the class surveyor, the ship owner's representative, and the shipyard's supervisor for that space to ensure that every final detail has been corrected. And as you'll see in some of the photos I'll show here in a little bit, that can be there's a large loophole here, a large opening for mistakes to occur, and that's kind of where our role as a consultant has been helpful. Design issues that we've run into because of the size of the vessel and in particular the beam. Trying to shoehorn everything in and comply with SOLAS safe return to port requirements, particularly for separating the machinery spaces, has been difficult. In this particular case, we've to minimize the footprint of the casings, the two casings somewhat overlap, which causes steps in the main vertical zones, which is not ideal. Again, because of the lack of involvement from the designer, we've installed a large jacuzzi directly above the navigation bridge. So any leakages is going to come right through the ceiling and into the bridge and right over the electronics on the console. We've got this garage that we've built into the side of the ship for tenders and launching those, etc. And those again cause some issues with layout of the spaces. We've got a marina with a fold out swim platform built into the stern of the vessel, gasoline storage for our Zodiacs, and how do we refill the gas cans is a headache. We've built in a laundry chute, so we've got a huge chimney that's running from deck 10 all the way down to deck 2, right down the center of the vessel. And then the comfort class notation, which I've mentioned. So this is an example of, and this is 2 vessels that are being built on the slipway behind the ship we're involved with. And you can see it's a typical slipway design with a dock gate at the on the right side of the picture, just outside the picture frame there. But as you can see, everything is being brought in piece by piece. The yard has across the main thoroughfare that's just outside, just forward of these 2 ships. Is a main waterfront street. And the steel shops are on the other side of that street. So we actually have to stop traffic in order to bring the steel over and into the yard to start construction. Just an old, an outdated process. And so one of the things we ran into is we found some significant buckling in some areas because of the way the ship was built. And those had to be corrected once the ship was launched. Within our scope, I'll go through a few of the examples and show you some photos of things that we're talking about. So here's a photo of a deck drain being installed into the overhead, and you can see even with the pipe penetrations and everything around it, you can see that before they didn't do the installation or finish the installation of the drain before they insulated. So they just, the guys responsible for the deck drain came in, they tear out the insulation. And our big question in all of this is who's tracking it? The shipyard did not have a process to say that this insulation was damaged. They were not doing a daily walkthrough to document any of this and track it. Fabrication in place. You can see here on this photo that when they came to, they had already installed the bulkhead liner, and they had to cut a section out so that they could finish running the section of piping, vacuum piping for the toilets. On the left side of this photo, you can see one of the vibration dampers for the bulkhead. And these are about every 2 to 3 meters on a bulkhead for each and every cabin throughout the ship. Again, overhead insulation. These are all insulation that has been torn open so that they can put pipe hangers and brackets for cable runs. I think somewhat self-explanatory. They tear out the insulation and it just gets stacked. It's a waste of material. It's a waste of time. Increases the cost to the yard. So our role has been to try and help get some of this under control by putting putting procedures and documentation processes in place. Over here on the left, you can see they're using some cable ties. Obviously, this is just done for the purpose of maintaining the coils up and out of the way. But you'll see some photos elsewhere, and that is a pet peeve of the Coast Guard's that we're trying to keep track of. Picture here of again a deck drain that was installed after the fact, after the insulation was done. But yet the ventilation duct has been installed on top of that, and no one's gone back up and reinserted the insulation or repaired it. How's that going to be done? Is it going to be missed? Because the piping runs are being done somewhat after the fact. Here's a case where when the pipes were installed, there's now insufficient room behind the pipe to replace and repair the insulation. In some cases, we've actually gone to a for lack of a better term, I'll call it a checkerboard process where we've had to reinstall the insulation on the opposite side of the bulkhead, and then overlap and build insulation bridges to make sure that we get the proper coverage. In this case, again, behind the ductwork here, they couldn't fit the insulation. They actually went with and found a different type of insulation board that was thinner, still met the same A60 requirements that they could then go ahead and install here. But now, how do we seal the gaps and the interface between the two types of insulation? It's just a headache and requires a lot of a lot of focus and attention to make sure that these areas are being addressed before we put the decorative liners and all the pretty work up. In this case, this is a photo of a ventilation duct coming through a B15 insulation pad draft stop above the top of a bulkhead, cabin bulkhead, and they're using a phlegmastic type sealant, but didn't do a good job. And again, our concerns are trying to make sure we identify these. Our goal, because of the pandemic, the Coast Guard has reduced their ability to visit the vessel on a more frequent basis has been impacted. And so one of our goals is to try and document as much of this, the construction methods and the quality of the work as we can, so that when the vessel's ready for delivery, we're not having to come in and open up these bulkhead panels so that they can do these inspections. And when they see when you see in situations like this, it makes it very difficult to put together a report extolling the quality of work and the processes to make sure that everything is done correctly. Here is one of the galleys. You can see that they've torn out the insulation around the prep counter and the refrigeration units underneath. These gaps extend behind this stainless steel system, which workspace that's been installed and is now permanently mounted. How are they going to get behind it? Here's you can see the guys trying to get up into the overhead to close out some of these gaps. One of the issues that came up during the Coast Guard's first visit was actually with these brackets for the vibration dampeners, because they're in some cases onto a main fire zone boundary, which requires A60 protection. How much of these brackets how much of the bracket needs to be insulated? For those that are familiar with the insulation standards and requirements in SOLAS, for quite typically for a boundary or the ending of the insulation, there's about a 450 millimeter insulation bridge that you're supposed to put on. Well, that will come all the way out to almost to the end of this bracket once all is said and done. So does that need to be done? We actually went so far as to calculate the surface area and the potential for heat transfer through this mounting bracket for the vibration dampers. Some other, I mentioned plastic wire tie cable wraps. Here they're hanging them. Are these all going to be corrected and removed and replaced with the metallic supports that we're required to have? Also, in this case, the arrow here on the left is showing what for us was a new style of cable penetration between A0 or A60 boundaries, and it used a essentially a canvas sleeve fit into a steel opening, and then that canvas sleeve gets filled with phlegmastic or other fire putty in between, but making sure that the putty is filled properly, is filled in between each of the cables is difficult in this type of an arrangement. Now for some examples of stuff that are outside of our scope. Obviously, as surveyors, as former class surveyors, our role in the QA process really is to be an additional set of eyes and ears. And while we may not have the ability to direct that they correct any of these things, it's important for us to bring them up so they don't get lost along the way. This is an issue not so much for compliance, but in this particular case, this is the one of the drains that's in one of the galleys, and you can see that we're going to have a couple of really sharp 90-degree corners and partial tiles when it comes time to tile the floor, which is going to create a maintenance headache for the owner down the line. It's also a weak spot for allowing water, because this area will inevitably crack with the tiling, or the grout will work loose, and now we've got water getting trapped underneath on a steel deck that we can't see until it starts leaking into the space below. So ideally, if possible, we'd like to see these aligned a little better to reduce the cutting of the tiles. As I mentioned earlier, we had cases in some areas where we were finding deflections or even some buckling in cases after the boat was floated and everything had a chance to settle, that had to be addressed. So we were on the lookout for steel work. This is a recent one that we came across down in the forward bulkhead of the main engine room. And this goes, in my mind, this goes back to their outdated construction process, where they pre-cut two, I want to say 400 millimeter, maybe 600 millimeter diameter holes for pipe runs. I found out that they didn't need them there, so they welded in inserts, then turned around and cut two smaller pipe openings right in the same area. So we've now compromised the strength of this main watertight bulkhead. Not a clear picture, but again, similar issue that we came across where we're misaligned piping or piping that was not properly placed, and we're having to recut holes through steel bulkheads, leaving sharp corners and other areas to crack and cause weaknesses. Misalignment here of the ventilation trunks. So now we're going to have have to find a way to better align, or you're looking at some sort of flexible ducting here. And of course, you've got two steel bulkheads on either side. So, do we need to have a fire damper here? Does that further exacerbate the construction of the ducting? And finally, this was an interesting one for the emergency escape out of the pod room. This door, once the steel hand railing was installed, the door could not be opened. So just things that we need to keep our eyes out for. All right, that's all I had. Any questions or?
Fascinating. Thank you ever so much, George. Anybody want to pop a question or two up for George? Quality management systems, I suppose, is what comes to the back of my mind. Things there that just shouldn't be happening. Is that a fair comment or is that a stupid comment?
I think it's a fair comment. I think it goes back to the construction techniques and the processes being not as robust. And part of that is probably due to their background and experience on less complex building projects, and just not not having the foresight to ramp up some of these processes. So I don't, to be quite honest, I don't recall off the top of my head if they're an ISO 9000 not, but this was a major step up for them in new construction, and probably, I think if they were to look back on it, probably a bigger step than they were ready to take.
Sure. Barnaby's popped a question up, says, how did you interact with the class surveyors?
We have had some interactions during the Coast Guard's one and only visit. Class was with us. Unfortunately, we're not dealing directly with them, and that's been a little bit of a headache. It also, and that's actually brings up a very good point. For most class societies, new build projects are these types of shipyards are the construction projects are managed by the local surveyors. If I go to Meyer Werf or to Fincantieri, Lloyd's or DNV have a dedicated new build project team of surveyors there. That is, will start out initially 3 or 4 surveyors when they first start cutting steel, and will ramp up to as many as 8 or 9 by the time they're doing machinery installations, electrical commissioning tests, and everything else. In this particular case, it's being run out of the local survey station that consists of 3 surveyors, one of which has since retired, and one is transferring, and who also have responsibility for a couple of repair yards in the area, as well as the vessels that normally call in the port. And so class oversight, the amount of hours that are being spent on the project are probably much lower than are needed, especially when taking into consideration the experience of the shipbuilder in this. So, we've talked, I've had some conversations with the ship owner's site team and with the shipyard itself about needing to push class to get more resources and probably some more higher knowledge, because the local surveyors are not normally doing passenger ships either. So they're, while they may be qualified, they may not have the ultimate level of experience that this type of a project demands.